Great. Hello, my name is Dean Ernzen from the University of Notre Dame, and I'm a Higher Education Advisory Council member and the moderator for this session. We're excited to welcome you, and we'll be learning about Purdue's Embedded Dynamic Engagement Score from Michelle Bates with the Purdue For Life Foundation. While Michelle is presenting, I'll be monitoring this session chat, which can be found just to the right of the presentation screen. Now I'll turn it over to Michelle to get things started.
Thanks, Dean. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're going to be talking about embedded dynamic engagement scoring in action, and I'm Michelle Bates with the Purdue For Life Foundation with Purdue University. So a little bit about what Purdue is doing with Salesforce. We went live last January with Salesforce and UC Innovation's Ascend package to support our advancement organization. And we will be, we're rolling out more broadly across campus now. So we're trying to identify how we pull together those pockets of Salesforce that have popped up over the years, as well as other groups who don't have a CRM but have a need. So we're working on that right now. We actually kicked that off last week, and we're really focused right now on the corporate relations, partnerships, and communication space. Okay, so let's get into the topic of the day. We're going to be talking specifically about Ascend AI, the case engagement score, how we've taken the case engagement score and created another version of it, what we're calling a weighted engagement score. And then I'll show you a couple, a couple clips of what it looks like in action, a little demo. So as I mentioned, Purdue went live with Ascend last January, and what we're doing right now is we're partnering with UC Innovations to roll out some of their AI tools. And their AI tools include engagement insights, giving insights, and predictive modeling. So today we're talking specifically about engagement insights. But giving insights, we're excited to start that project as well. I think we have our kickoff call next week on that. So really powerful tools built on Tableau CRM. So let's talk more specifically about the case engagement score. So Engagement Insights is built on the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education Case Engagement Metric Survey Guidelines, which I'm sure you're all aware. My team puts some significant time into it every year, trying to pull some of these numbers together and submit them to CASE. So we're really excited about what UC Innovations has built out here in their Engagement Insights tool. So hopefully what we'll be able to do is just pull the numbers directly from this tool and submit them to CASE, and it'll be really efficient for our organization and our analytics team. And also it will be a great tool for our end users to look at, and our leadership to look at engagement at Purdue. Another great thing about this is that as CASE might update their survey, their guidelines, and exactly what they're looking at measuring over time, UC Innovations is going to be updating those data flows behind the scenes. So it's just going to be current. And again, we're not going to have to tweak SQL code or anything that we may have done in the past. So very exciting for our team. So you may be familiar with exactly the modes of the cases defined for their engagement score. So they are specifically measuring communication, experiential, philanthropic, and volunteer. And you can see here that in Engagement Insights, it's measuring all of these at an overall level and also at a constituent level. So this is really useful if you want to track an individual constituent and how engaged they are. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the weighted engagement score. So at Purdue, we really wanted to be able to measure more than just alum, right? We wanted to measure anyone who's a constituent with the university and how they're engaging. We also wanted to measure some things a little bit differently than Case had outlined. So we kind of Purdueized it, or we made it kind of a 2.0 version. So we're going to have both. We're going to have the Case one, so we could submit the survey and participate in that benchmarking, but we're also going to support this weighted engagement score model that I'll be sharing with you. So you can see here, this is a screenshot of our build out in a sandbox environment, but we have chosen to continue to measure the 4 modes that CASE has. So philanthropy, volunteer, experiential, and communication. What we've done is we have components of each of these, and each of them are add up to 100, but we have them weighted. So you'll see a little bit later how we have each mode weighted. And so that's a way for us to really measure it in the way we want to measure engagement with Purdue. So let's dig into each one of these a little bit. Philanthropy, we are tracking recency, frequency, velocity, consistency, and commitment. And so recency considers all of the gifts made during the current fiscal year. So cash transactions. And so if a constituent has given this year, they get 20 points. Frequency would be the number of transactions this fiscal year. Velocity is an increase in giving over the past 5 years. So, if they had an increase from fiscal year 17 to 18, 18 to 19, and then perhaps 20 to 21, they would get 4 points for each of those, and that constituent would be awarded 12 points. Consistency is a number of years of giving for the past 5 years. So again, if they gave in fiscal year 17, 18, 19, and 21, they would get 4 points for each of those, and that would be 16. And then finally, commitment. If a constituent has committed for a $25,000 multi-year gift or a will provision in the past 5 years, we award them 20 points. For the volunteer engagement mode, we're measuring activities, board participation, and awards. So, annual volunteer activities like being a mentor, a faculty fellow, or a student advisor, participating as a panelist, or we have days of service on the campus, anything like that would go into the activity component of this score. And then board and committee memberships, those would make up 45 points of this overall 100-point score. So any participation in that in the last couple of years would earn them points in that space. And then finally, awards. So if they receive any volunteer awards, they receive 2 points for each award bestowed upon them in that current fiscal year. So the next mode of our engagement score is experiential, and there's a lot of pieces to this score. So we have athletics, season ticket holding, event attendance. We have some special weekend events throughout the year. We have a special donor event in Naples, Florida every year. So if they would attend that, or our Boilermaker Ball that we have coming up actually here in February, as well as how many degrees they hold from the university. So there's various calculations behind each of these, but they all add up together to the experiential component of this metric. And then finally, communication. So we have a number of things in this one as well. So we're measuring if there's a substantive contact, and this is pulling from the contact report object in Ascend. So if they have 1 or more substantive meetings in a year, we go ahead and score them 25 points. A proactive data update. If we have a constituent log into our constituent portal and update exactly how they want us to reach out to them, how they want to be communicated with, or perhaps an update of an address or an update of an email address, we award points. We feel like that's a sign that there's some engagement there. So we award points there. Email open rate and click rates. Those are specific to, how engaged a person is with the communication that we're sending out. So based on the percentage of emails that we're sending out and what percentage of those they're opening and what percentage of those they're clicking on. And then finally, dissatisfaction and do not contact work a little differently. These are actually negative points. So if we have anything in these, specifically do not contact, if we get a do not contact, we don't want to be we don't want the university to reach out to us at all. We actually zero out this category and it's a negative 100 points. So all of this goes into Tableau CRM, and behind the scenes it's calculated. And we have currently each mode weighted as the following. So we have philanthropy at 40%, volunteer and experiential each at 25%, and communication at 10%. What we were thinking is we really want this to be an engagement score. So we really wanted volunteer and experiential to add up more than philanthropy. We have other ways to measure philanthropy and propensity to give and different things like that. So we feel like it's important. So it has 40%, but volunteer and experiential do equal more as a whole. So that's kind of how we landed on that. And then again, we have the trend lines here for each mode and then a summary. We can do it based on quarterly or based on a fiscal year. Okay, so I do have a little bit of kind of a quick little video that I'll let play here. So you can see here, this is built out in a sandbox environment. And you can see that, again, the 4 modes, just like the case, only they're weighted. And then you can see all of the different components behind each of these modes are measured with the supporting data below. So that's really helpful right there on one screen. And again, all of this data is dynamic. So as data in Ascend is updated, it will dynamically update the scores in this engagement model. So I'm going to pop over here to show again, here's our trend lines. We can look at those. And then the really helpful thing, I think, for a lot of our end users is that it appears directly on the constituent record. So just like that case score, we will have this weighted engagement score also available on the constituent record where they can look at it. They can really see how engaged that individual constituent might be with Purdue. So with that, I will be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great walkthrough and illustration of how that has been constructed in your Salesforce instance. One of the questions that came through was, can you talk a little bit more about why Purdue thought it was important to create a Purdue-specific score in addition to the case methodology?
Sure, absolutely. Would you like me to stop sharing? Is that easier, or should I continue to share?
It's up to you. If you feel you need to
Okay.
reference the slide, you can keep sharing or just leave it as it is right now. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Very good. Yeah. So what's been happening in our organization is over the past year, you hear me say I'm with the Purdue For Life Foundation, and prior to that, we were just the Purdue Foundation as one entity, and then we had the Alumni Association as another entity, and we merged last spring. Actually, almost 2 years ago. It's just a long process, but we merged. And so what we really want to do is we view what was happening in the Alumni Association as kind of the engagement arm. And because we merged, now we have an engagement department. And what we're trying to do is really measure how successful are we as one organization, and how helpful are the engagement activities in continuing to deepen and strengthen our relationships with the constituents. And then finally, obviously over time we want to convert them into donors. So we really felt like having a Purdue specific scoring model would help us know if we're being successful with our new organization. And then there's just some philosophies about the case score that are just you know they're measuring certain things that are different than what we would want to measure. For example, if a donor gives $1 million in a year or a donor gives $5 in a year, I believe they each get 1 point in the case model. So we really wanted to be able to reflect some differences in how intense each of those relationships were.
And Ellie had a kind of a follow-up question on that. So you've got your own scoring weights that were determined that were different from case. Were those developed, those weighting levels, based on past history or statistical models, or how did you arrive at those weighting values?
Yeah, so really it was a committee discussion. Honestly, we have a number of pretty experienced folks on our group, on our team that's been putting this together, and we just kind of hashed through it and discussed pros and cons and landed on something. And honestly, it's a starting place for us. So this is in Sandbox. Hopefully, we'll have it live here in February, but we are open to changing it over time and seeing how it's working. But it felt like the logical place to start.
Great. And then in terms of inputs, Cheryl Morris was asking about how you track annual volunteer activities. Are the alumni registering for each activity, or are campus partners reporting alumni involvement in those activities, or how do you gather that information?
Great question. So, several of those. Yes, we are actually working on building out the volunteer piece of our Salesforce implementation right now. So we're hoping that a lot of those activities will be set up in the system and we'll be able to track that accordingly, as well as I anticipate some list imports. We'll be getting different data from different groups across campus and loading them into the system, so they also feed into the score. So various ways.
Great. And then Lori Dembowitz was asking a question about the Tableau CRM. Is the data uploaded dynamically from CRM to Tableau, or is there an integration every so many hours? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have our data flows, I think for this are set up to run nightly. So all the data that we would see are, would be from the previous day, but that's plenty frequent for our purposes for the engagement score. So, a gift is entered or volunteer activity is entered, those data flows will run overnight and then it will reflect in the score the following day.
And then another follow-up question from Lori as we're coming into just the last 3 minutes of our session here, but
Uh-huh.
obviously a very large project, a lot of effort going into this. Do you have some key learnings or takeaways that you would share with the group about undertaking a project like this or trying to do other types of engagement scoring?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, starting with the case model, I think was helpful. I mean, a lot of the heavy lifting, identifying the modes, that was a good starting place for us. We didn't feel like we were starting at nothing. And then we broke out into sub teams based on specialties, right? Like our prospect development leader was leading the philanthropy group, and then I had our broad-based campaigns and annual giving leader was leading the communication segment. Our engagement person was leading the volunteer, and so they broke out in sub teams with experts, and they kind of came back with, this is what we think we should measure, and then we've just kind of iterated over the past several months. So that seemed to work pretty well for us. I think we have the mindset that this is a starting place and we'll mature it over time, but we feel like regardless, having something out there is really going to be helpful to knowing if all the activities we're doing are successful with our alum and constituents.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for those thoughtful answers and for all the folks that submitted questions. There's just one more question that came in from Mike Walter here. It says, how do you use the scores most? Gift officer assignment or providing a different message?
We really haven't informed many like business processes or things like that with the scores at this point. We're really watching trending and engagement activities so far. So I think it's looking at trends over time is really where our starting place is. I could see us starting to use it in the other spaces, but again, the Purdue-wise version or this weighted one isn't live yet either. So it'll be interesting to see what areas really latch onto it and start using it. But I have a feeling it'll be the engagement group first.
Great. All right, and thank you. We are at time, but Michelle, thank you for this very informative presentation and for all the attendees who brought their great questions and attention to this session. So thank you all. You can head back to the main stage area and find your next session. You can join a networking table and talk with others, or you can visit the sponsors in the booth area as well. Thank you very much.